So this is an interesting one. We're diving into the Hotline Benchmark report. This is issue categories. Mm-hmm. So this is one that everyone's super in tune with. Everybody's super dialed in on. What is this information telling us from 2020?
Yeah, so you'll see the top three categories here are HR, right? Questions about policies, questions about, staffing and schedule and stuff like that. It's business quality, which is that's related to the industry that you're in, right? Like in finance, are we making loans right? In healthcare, are we taking care of patients right? Whatever it is. And then management and staffing, right? This is, I was mistreated by my manager or they made the wrong call or whatever. And then we have a bunch of other categories here. So this is telling you of those reports that you're getting, where are they being split and what are the issues that people are reporting? There's another cross section to this. Again, there's always complementarity between these data points of where are the severe issues coming from? Where are the high risk issues coming from? So we saw some motion in these categories this year. So talk to us about how things changed in 2020.
So I think the big story for 2020 is really for every year with this category in particular. This is the metric or this is the benchmark that has the most noise in it. Mm-hmm. These categories are very subjective in nature. So it's hard to kind of, other than like really high level trends, it's hard to really see any meaningful takeaways from this. This is really meant to help you understand your own category changes from year to year. Assuming that your categories are relatively sort of stable, you're not changing them all the time, you got to look and be able to see at a high level, at least anecdotally, what are some significant changes that have happened from year to year? And can you sort of at least tell a story about why those changes occurred?
Right. And it's the motion from where your categories were at last year to where they are this year. You don't necessarily expect 20% of your issues to be business quality, but if that went, down from last year to this year, is that also happening in your population?
Yeah, and an example is some folks will put management and staffing stuff in HR because that's how they've devised their category. So keeping yours sort of relatively constant, not changing them all the time, tying them to something meaningful like your code or something like that. Just having, if you have 1,000 different categories, it's going to be hard to do analysis, especially if you're always adding, subtracting and stuff like that. Comparative periods are harder to compare. Yeah. Relative periods, you know what I'm saying?
You guys get it. Yeah. Yeah, so this year we saw safety and environment pop up. That had been in other before because it was such a small portion, and that's above 8% this year. And that's, kind of what you would expect in the middle of a pandemic. People saying we don't feel safe at work, and there's something about the environment that is putting me at risk. I think in a standard year, that's, a lot of manufacturing concerns or driving concerns and things like that. And I think a lot of the COVID stuff started getting categorized into that. So we saw that pop up this year.
Yeah, and I'll add one thing. We did see an increase in like discrimination and harassment calls toward the end of the year in the HR category because of all the social stuff that was going on. So whatever's coming through your hotline is at least correlated with whatever the broader sort of conversation in our country is. Mm-hmm. Whatever people are concerned about, they're going to be talking about in the hotline. And I think we saw that again last year.
Yeah, and it just speaks to how pervasive and comprehensive and important the work that we do as compliance professionals is. Right? We always talk, Nick, about work-life integration, not balance, right? If someone is stressed out about something going on in their community, they don't forget about that stress when they're at work and vice versa. If you can create a great, safe, just environment for employees, they're going to go back home to their family feeling more like, the world is on their side and they're treated like a human. So, you want to match those trends and realize that we as stewards of employees are really stewards of families and communities because we're all in this together.
That's right.
Nick, I got to be I love all my children equally, but I think this is my favorite one.
This is a big one. So this tells you the aging of reports in our system. You can see last year, our clients were able to close almost 80% of their cases in less than 30 days. So yeah, nice job, everybody. Best practice is still close as many cases, all your cases in less than 30 days. When those are aged for a long time, it creates pockets of risk. It creates perceived duplicity from the workforce because I went through all the trouble of calling and now I don't even hear anything because this case is just staying open. So many times when you see different distributions on a metric like this, it's because intake isn't that good. The investigators are struggling, spinning their wheels to get moving. And sometimes it's an operational issue where there's perhaps not SMART goals on the investigation to make sure that, hey, we're measuring this stuff, we're meeting every week or whatever operationally to keep these things moving through the system.
Yeah. So I think it's unrealistic to expect that every single issue is going to be closed within 30 days. If you're doing that, you're probably misstaffed or you're probably closing things too quickly and kind of trying to teach to the test. So there's some stuff that you're going to have some follow-ups and you're going to have some investigations and you're going to have legal review that's going to push it over here. But as you can see, when you have good intake that is starting out your process, whether it's in Office or web form or app or on your hotline, when you have good intake that gives you good information. So you're not just starting your investigation with a hint of like, oh, I think somebody in the Western region is discriminating in some way, but you have good data to get your investigation started. That intake times a good investigation process, which should be facilitated by a good case management system of, we're going to track this. We have standards. I know what's required. I can get someone's input on this case. And then obviously your team is key to this, having them trained, helping them know what is required, and really giving them the autonomy and the power to make calls and move stuff forward. That's going to help you get your case days down. And like you said, Nick, when a bunch of stuff is getting closed in 30 days, even 30 days can seem long, right? If I have a discrimination claim or I'm getting sexually harassed and I wait 4 weeks for something to happen about it, that can seem like an eternity. So some of this stuff, we're going to take action on quickly. But when a bunch of this stuff is closing in on 30 days, or in under 30 days, you have two benefits, right? You have a benefit to your risk management, right? Like there's not a potential lawsuit sitting around for 120 days that now it's going to the papers or it's going to the courts. So you're managing that risk, but really a lot of the ROI in performing to the standard comes from the reinforcement in culture. Someone says, hey, you know what? At my last job, everyone told me never call the hotline because you get roasted for it. But here, I kind of stuck my neck out and did it, and it went great. I don't know everything that happened, but it seemed like it got resolved, and like I was protected and nothing bad came from it. That has a lot of follow-on positive impacts to a bunch of other people that maybe don't see these issues, but, are going to take a conflict of interest, they're going to fill out a conflict of interest form. Or, someone who hasn't reported, but they're going to respect the compliance team because they say, you know what, those guys are on my side. That team really cares about me. In that cultural impact, those follow-on effects of doing this right really has a long tail of impact for the good of your company.
So if you have 10 or 20% in these buckets, there's definitely a problem that can definitely be better at scale. If you only have a third or 40%, 30%, less than half of your stuff closing in less than 30 days, that's an absolute problem. More than 20 to 30% down here is an absolute problem. And there's room for improvement. And again, usually with something in the way that I just described it, little changes can have massive impacts, can really move the needle on it. So just work to get as much of your cases into this top bucket as you can, set SMART goals operationally, and make sure that you're getting the right information so your investigators can hit the ground running.
So issue anonymity, right? So anonymity is very important in this process. You want to facilitate people reporting issues and remaining anonymous, right? If they're concerned about retaliation, if they just don't want to get involved in it or whatever, it's a best practice to obviously not have the phone just ring to the CEO's secretary or admin, or not just, everything goes to your boss, right? They should have a channel where they can speak up and be protected from potential retaliation, even if it's just perceived retaliation, right? Even if we would never do that, just giving them that extra security of like, well, I know that you can't do it is going to get you better traction. So what are we seeing here in issue anonymity?
This is probably my favorite child. This is the one everyone cares about, anonymity rate. So this is a tough metric because so much of the answer is it depends. Is my rate too high? Is it too low? All those things are going to depend on where you're coming from, what the composition of your workforce is, what industry you're in, and so forth. It's good to look year over year to look for significant changes in this metric. This is also kind of what I would call a barbell metric. A read too low, if you're only getting 5, 10% anonymous reports, that's too low. If you're getting 80, 90% anonymous reports, 70% anonymous reports, that's too high. So talk to us about why that's true, why that barbell is in play.
Yeah, as with most of these, you want to look at how many reports you're getting, right? If you're getting half a report per 100 employees, well, you want to get whatever reports you can. You'll take anonymous reports or identified reports because there's a bunch of stuff that I should be finding out about. So I think if you're in a nascent compliance program, or you're just starting to kind of get some upgrades in place, or maybe there was a breach of trust that you're trying to recover from, well, then you'll welcome those reports in however you can get them. Right? If in this case you're not getting any and then you get 5 times more next year and they're 90% anonymous, it's like, all right, well, that's better than not finding out about it at all. So, starting out, you might be happy to deal with a lot of anonymous reports. As you kind of hit the middle of a program, I think you're going to see something maybe like this kind of 30 or 40%. But really, as things get better, you want to see that anonymous rate drop, right? I think you certainly always want to offer it. But you're always, I think, going to see some people saying, hey, you know what? I kind of want to say something, but I want to stay a little distant from it. But if you have a strong program where people are educated about it. You have a third party in place. You've proved to people that you don't retaliate and you protect their anonymity. You should start seeing that anonymity rate drop. Say that 5 times fast. You should start seeing that drop as people say, hey, you know what? I'm not that worried about being anonymous because I trust the compliance program. So that's why you're going to kind of get that barbell where, if you need a bunch of reports, then like you should be happy that they're anonymous. If your program is really mature, you should start seeing that anonymity rate drop. But it really depends, again, on what your volume of reports per 100 employer.
That's right.
We've seen this be pretty steady around that kind of 2/3, 1/3 over time. Some of, we saw it drop a bit last year. We don't know if that's generational. It's not clear whether that was just kind of COVID and people were working from home and, just kind of in a different state of what they were reporting. But it's been kind of around this kind of 60-40, 2/3, 1/3 proportion, at least within our data set. And, we're reading that as a healthy level. And maybe this is getting better where people are building more trust in their programs.
Yeah. And frankly, the way that we do our elicitation interviews, our adaptive interviews here, ends up getting people more comfortable with the process.
Yes, it does.
You know what I'm saying?
It does.
They're not raced off the phone.
Mm-hmm.
They're able to have an actual conversation. And we don't have the metrics this year, but it would be interesting to start tracking how many reports start anonymous and end up flipping to identified by the end, because it's not a zero number. It's
Sure.
a decent number.
Yeah, because if you're engaging with someone, treating them like a human, being empathetic, they're saying...
Answering their questions about the process.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're doing that, then people are going to say, okay, this isn't a sham.
Right.
This isn't, somebody
Right.
with a tissue over the phone acting like they're somebody
Right.
else and they're about to roast me. And you can build that trust. That trust gets built throughout the process with a single caller. That trust gets built throughout the investigation with other people who are involved in it. And then over time with your entire employee population. Because listen, word gets around. There's some culture of
Right.
how people view compliance in the world and within your company and within microcultures. And we can do something to change that by the way we run our processes, by the way we treat people, and by the way we close out issues and deliver information.
I mean, think about what, the point you just made is a great one. Even in the healthiest culture, there are going to be people who have personality types that are they're more conservative or they don't want to risk it. And they're not going to report unless they believe that there's a true anonymous option that's going to protect them. Even if your culture is like the best.
Yeah.
It's human nature because it's all a big distribution of different individual types. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. So we reviewed today categories and you're split among those. We reviewed issue days open and the anonymity rate here. So check these out. Check out the full detail in the benchmark report. And please stay tuned for more of these previews and let us know if anyone at Compliance Line can help you be a better ethics expert.